Hey folks, welcome back to Can I Chase Paranormal. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you've had a great week, and a really big thank you to everybody that's subscribed. I really do appreciate that. I don't have that many subscribers on my channel, so every new one is especially appreciated. So I want to do something slightly different today, and just to basically tell a story, something that happened, and I is it paranormal? I'm not sure, but you can be a judge of that by the end. So, going back to 1998, just lost my job. I was quite lonely, and through a friend of a friend, I got chatting to a girl. We'll call her Chris. I don't want to use a real name, and she lived a long way away from me. I lived in Birmingham. She lived in a place called Epsom, which I'm just looking is about 165 kilometres from where I live. That's as the crow flies. I think generally about 200 kilometres down south, just past London, so a little bit south of London. Anyway, I met her. We used to talk for a long time, and over a couple of years, I learnt that she had quite a bit of trauma that happened to her over a short period of time, and because of this, she was unable to work. And we would talk for a long time, and sometimes she would be quite happy, but then suddenly her mood would change, and sometimes she would have a go at me for, it felt at the time, for nothing, but I guess this was just trauma working its way out. And she was very entertaining otherwise. She trained as a graphic artist. I think she hadn't done that job for quite a number of years though. She also loved the music, so we had lots in common to talk about. A couple of years into our friendship, I was still unemployed, but I'd managed to sum up enough confidence to get some part-time voluntary work at what we call a charity shop, of which there are many where I live. I think on the high street, at that time we had about 7 or 8 of these charity shops. And I'd like to think I was at the best one. Indeed, we'd have lots of donations handed to us, and one of my roles was to sort through the donations, separate them, put like with like. So around about the time that I was working in this charity shop, which was about 2000, my friend Chris she'd started going into, I think she might have been having some cognitive behavioural therapy. And because of that, the trauma really started to come out. And I'd have these phone calls where, I mean, she was lovely, but I'd have these phone calls where she was quite angry, but not with me, but with a situation that she completely forgot about in her life. And I think it's like drawing out poison. It's a painful business, especially if you have like PTSD or something. So these thoughts and feelings were coming out now, more so than they had done over the last 2 years. And I think she was just I think she'd been trying to compartmentalise the feelings. So anyway, one of the things that came out around about this time was a book that she was given by her dad. At the time, I think her dad was very ill, and indeed he passed away shortly after he gave her this book, I believe. I might be wrong. But because she was into art so much, it was one of the last gifts he gave her. And this was a book that was around about the same time, but it isn't the actual book or the actual... but it was very similar to this. It was a book about art. It was... let me just bring that back a bit. Yeah, it was a book about art, and it was full of sketches and drawings of weird and wonderful creatures, a little bit like the Token Bestiary by David Day. So her dad had given her that book, and she wasn't really interested in reading it at the time because she was spending a lot of time with him. I think he was in and out of hospital. Ultimately, she gave it to a nurse, and she kind of forgot about it because there was a lot going on in her life. So this therapy she was having, it brought out all of these kind of feelings, and She really wanted to express them to me, how angry she was. Um, and although it wasn't trivial to me to hear this, I, at the time, I was dealing with my own sort of trauma, so I sort of felt that it was maybe, you know, is it that important that she gave a book away to a random nurse who then never brought it back? And I kind of agreed in the end that, yeah, you know, it was probably a big deal now that to think that this guy never brought it was a male nurse, he never brought the book back to her. Um, so a couple of days passed and we hooked up again for another call, and she had some news. She managed to track down this nurse. Um, Managed to find out. I don't know how she managed to find him, but she found him, and he was very apologetic. He said he had the book, but his daughter was doing an art course, and she'd taken it to university with her, and she was at university in Bristol. So that was that. In the meantime, I'm working at a charity shop in Birmingham, 165 kilometres from her, and I was going through a lot of a new delivery. Somebody had literally emptied their entire library of books, it seemed. So I had like a pile, and it was like it was way up high. Um, and yeah, so we managed to get a bit of stuff out on the shelf, and I came across these two books. One of them being that one, which I inevitably kept for myself because I was a bit of a Tolkien fan, and there was several of these other books, which I thought might be of interest to my friend. Now I think the book might have been called Fantastic Creatures or Amazing Creatures or something like that lines, and it had a very similar cover to that. It was, I think it was from the 70s or early 80s. It had like a real kind of beige colour, and there's some fabulous sketches on the front. But I can't for the life of me remember the actual specific name of the book. Anyway, so I'm going through these books, and I found, you know, two or three of these similar type of books, and I kind of phoned my friend up on the night. I said, listen, you know, I know it's terrible that you've lost your book, but you know, please let me, let me send a couple of these books down to you now. The time of year it was I think it was October or November, so we weren't that too far away from Christmas. It was just around the corner, and I really wanted to, cheer her up a little bit, even if it wasn't, even if it wasn't sending the original, copies of his book or the exact book back. At least I could send her something, maybe along the lines. So anyway, she asked me what the book was, and I got to be honest, I forgot. I completely forgot what it was called. So I said, look, I'll promise to sort it out for you, and I'll send it down to you whenever I can. Again, another couple of days passed, and she phoned me up and she said, so the nurse that was looking after her dad that she contacted, he already told her that he gave a book to his daughter who went to university in Bristol. But now Bristol's about 160 kilometres from London. So if you go down to London, you're going sort of like south. You could be going west about 160 kilometres. So obviously to come back to Birmingham, it's like a big sort of triangle. You go down to Epsom, just below London, west 160 kilometres to Bristol, and then I think it's about 120 kilometres back to Birmingham if you wanted to do a round trip. So as I was saying, she managed to hear from this nurse again. This nurse said, he'd managed to contact his daughter. His daughter had recently left Bristol University, so obviously everything's in retrospect. And unfortunately, she left the book with another student now, and they parted their ways. They hadn't seen each other, and so that was that. That was the end of a paper trail as far as we were concerned. And yeah, she was upset, but at least she was sort of happy to know that the book had been used and that it had travelled from London 160 odd kilometres to Bristol, and that several people had used this book. So even though I think she was a little bit sad that she'd never get it, she was quite happy that, you know, it had been used. So a few weeks passed, and I'd completely forgotten about my promise to sort these books out for her. I was still working in a charity shop, and we had a lot of other stuff come in, and so things had piled up. To be honest, it was organised chaos, and the one day, I think it was in November, I was trying to pull a few items out. I think there were maybe toys or like games or jigsaws, because we wanted to start thinking about presents for kids. And jigsaw puzzles always been very popular in charity shops. So I was kind of pulling some stuff out from below this giant pile of everything, and all of a sudden the whole lot kind of toppled down. And I sort of thought, oh man, you know, I've got some work to do here, but I'm looking at the bottom of this pile, and there are these books, and I thought, oh shit, you know, I need to get these books out. I need to, you know, maybe get them ready to send down to her for Christmas. And this book was called Fantastic Creatures. As I said, I can't remember the exact title. I have searched a long, long time for this book, but it was called Fantastic Creatures, and or something like that. So when I got home, I phoned up and I said, I got this book. It's one that you might be interested in, and I'm sorry, I meant to send it down to you before, but I've only just recovered them from the shop, and I had to pay like I think a discounted rate to buy them, and they were only cheap anyway. Books are always really cheap in charity shops, so I didn't mind paying for it, even though I was unemployed. But you can afford a couple of pence for something nice, and it's you know, it's a cheap present, but not cheap in a bad way. So I took these home and I gave her a ring and I said, you know, I've got this book for you. It's called Fantastic Creatures, and I heard a sound which sounded like a gasp on the other end of the phone. And she said, "Oh my God, that's the book, the same, basically the same book as what my dad had bought me." And I was like, I was literally, I don't believe it. This is just unreal that I've managed to find a copy of a book that your dad gave you, and you know what? It filled my heart with joy to know that I could send it down to. I said, "Look, we're only a few weeks away from Christmas. I'm gonna put this in a box with another book, and I'll send these books down to you for Christmas. Enjoy." So she knew what she was going to get, and a couple of a couple of weeks passed, and we were sort of like going into Christmas. I spoke to her a couple of times before then, and she seemed a lot calmer and happier in herself. I think you know, pulling out these bits of trauma, needle by needle, she was beginning to come to terms with some stuff that happened. And so I felt really, really good. I felt really kind of happy for her. Christmas Day came, and I was just going about doing stuff, and all of it out of the blue on Christmas Day, I get a call, and it's from this friend of mine, and she was almost in tears because she'd opened a parcel, and I thought, yeah, she said, "I've got your books." And I was just like, oh man, I'm so glad they got to you, because I was worried that they might get lost in the post or get you after Christmas. But she was really, really happy she got them, and she said, and I've got to tell you one other thing. She said, when I opened up the cover, and I think it was like sort of, if I can show you, sort of on the inside of the cover, just there, it was, for some reason, it was folded over. Now, I never noticed. And it was folded over sort of like, I don't know if you can see this, just there. And under the fold was two initials, and those were initials of her dad. And he'd sort of signed it, but just with the initials. So when she opened the book and she saw that the edge was folded down, she pulled it up open and she peeled round the edge, and there were the exact initials of her dad. I have no explanation for how this happened. Is it paranormal? Well, I think so. the serendipity is just coincidence, but it was incredible to think that something like this could happen. So this, as you can see, so 165 kilometers. So that book has travelled 165 kilometers to Bristol, and then it's travelled 122 kilometers to Birmingham, and then it's ended up in a small place called Erdington, in a street in Erdington. I used to work in a charity shop which was just down here. So essentially it's travelled 165 kilometres to Bristol, 122 kilometres to Birmingham. It's just so happened to end up in an area, a very small area of Birmingham, which has a high street, which has about seven or eight charity shops in this high street. So it's managed to make its way to Birmingham, to Erdington, to a specific charity shop in Erdington that just happens to have a volunteer there who just happens to be friends of a person who lost a book in the first place. Guys, hope you enjoyed that little story, and till next time, take care of yourselves, and have a great week.